it's asking them like, you invested in human identities through the years, right? You know this investment. And by the way, dear CFO, you know what is the budget for human identities? And we'll stop there for a second, and I will ask him like, but hey, what's your organizational focus today? Be out of the company. How do you do that? Adopting agents, adopting cloud. How do you think the agents in cloud through NHIs? Statistically, your organization 50 times more. Does it make sense the spend you have on human identities versus the non-humans? You have nothing there, by the way. We can stop there basically on that conversation. Was I fair
Love it.
enough? We're creating a lot of mess. We're creating a lot of, let's call it dirt. You connected it, it's not working. I'm always asking an organization, are you sure you cleaned it up? And there's a quiet in the room. And then like the first honest person says, no, we did not. And honestly, we are even scared to tell it to the business. It's like right now we're innovating. We don't want to, what are you talking about? We need to deploy.
Hello, everyone. This is Rick Wishka with the Cyber Pro Podcast. We're excited today. We got two guests, not just one. We have Amit and Danny. Both of them are entrepreneurs. They're cyber gurus. This is going to be a great conversation. To both of you, I don't care which one starts. Let's go with Amit because your A starts before D. Let's do that way. So who are you and why are you awesome?
Great to be here today. It's really nice to meet you. So I'm Amit. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at Oasis Security. I bring around 20 years of cybersecurity and identity experience in multiple companies, both on the enterprise side like Microsoft and on the startup landscape as well.
Love it. Danny, same question. Who are you and why are you awesome?
Well, I'm the CEO and co-founder, and why I'm awesome, because I was able to bring Amit to partner with me to build Oasis. This is why I'm awesome, right?
I love it. I love it. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about Oasis? What is it doing in the market? Why is it so cool? And what do people need to know?
You know, it's one identity space in general, and this is what Oasis is focusing on, revolutionizing the identity space, has a unique potential to it all the time, that it's helping security, but it also helps enable and expedite the business. And why me and Amit are in love with this idea and concept is because we're helping security teams, but we're right now, and we will speak about it much more in length in this podcast, enabling AI adoption and cloud adoption.
Amit, what do you think when somebody comes to you and says, 30-second pitch of what Oasis is? What do you do for them?
Yeah. So Oasis enables the business by allowing identity teams, right, to create and manage throughout the full life cycle of their non-human identities and agents, right? So prior to Oasis, identity teams were mostly focusing on human management, right, with traditional tools, but they couldn't really manage the agents and non-human identity they have to handle and govern, right? So we come in that space and helping them doing that end to end. And by that, of course, enabling the business to move fast.
Love it. Danny, I'm going to ask this question of you. You were co-founded, you built Oasis kind of before the agentic AI wave for the most part. What signals told you that those non-human identities, the NHIs, would explode and what everyone else was missing?
It was a very simple math, right? Like if in order to operate Danny to be active in a system, you need one identity that is called Danny at whatever, right? When you need a workload or like a machine or something like that, the number goes like 5, 10, like identities that you need to, or just like to operate a workload. Now, when you realize that like for every person in the organization, you're operating like dozens of workloads, automations, and now speaking agents, right? The math is very clear. We're talking about like 100x on accounts. So
It's
this
insane.
kind of like,
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry. It's insane. Keep going, please.
just like, and the interesting part is that, we were used to live in this Moore's law world, right? When like, like more infrastructure creating more value, right? That was like what my father was teaching me, what my grandfather was teaching me, right? And today you have like, dude, like we have enough infrastructure. The question is that what do we do with that? And it all blends to like, I was asking another friend of mine, like, like if you're giving an agent today an access to all of your system, like how much value can you get? It's like endless amount of value. It's like, and then you realize that the Moore's law world is like, it is the world of the past. We're like right now in the access world.
It's insane how quickly that law kind of has changed. I'm curious, I'm going to take this NHI component a little further. What do you think is one of the hardest technical problems when we focus on the NHI security? Is it discovery at scale? Is it trust ownership? What does that look like? How do you solve for it?
Yeah. So, what's make non-human identities and agents unique from the first place is how crucial there are for the business, right? So, if, for example, you are mismanaging a non-human identity, you might take basically all the business down, right? Whether it's your payment processes, your databases, access, and this what from the first place is making them so hard to manage, right? People are just afraid to touch them. Even if they think they're confident about the purpose of an identity, they will be very cautious before taking an action. So, one of the hardest challenges is providing, from the technical perspective, to provide this context, right, of what's the purpose of this identity, what is actually it's doing, what access it has, and what access it's usually also mostly using before you can take any action. That's from the technical perspective, right? From the business processes perspective, is how we, as a platform, as a product, how we gain this trust, moving together with them to be very confident while taking these actions, right? No one wants to be blamed on taking operational. To take the operations down, especially not before the holidays, of course. So, this is both from the technical and the business processes side of things.
We're ripe for a CrowdStrike or Microsoft blue screen of death while somebody goes on Thanksgiving. So we'll see if that happens again. But for both of you, I'd like you guys to take a stab at this. We know that agentic AI kind of spins up identities, the keys, the various resources pretty much autonomously. But what breaks first in traditional identity access management, and how are you replacing that with what you guys are doing?
So on multiple layers over there, right? First of all, there's a different philosophy right now in the world that we need to adjust. The original identity, or if you call like the legacy identity architecture, was built in a world when everything could be centralized, right? Was in a complete control of the IAM teams, right? And was dictated by a single policy that can be like, covering everything you have in your system. And then the question of if I'm provisioning or creating is just going through the IAM team. Today, this is not the case. And by the way, it's good that it's not the case, because today developers are creating their own accounts, right? Today, someone from marketing team can create his own agent, like in his marketing tool, right? And he will create his permissions for himself. So suddenly the accountability motion moved to another side, but the legacy architecture was built for something very different, which means that not only not keeping up with the pace and the size, which is like very manual, but also we don't know. What do we have? Like identity team are blind to what they have right now. Everything you will show them will open their eyes, right? But the cool thing is that you can actually achieve everything you used to have in terms of policies and governance without forcing a change in the infrastructure, without asking Melissa from marketing to, hey, can you please just do this? Like, no, help her and or change something. Like, no, let's work with what Melissa wants. Let's put one single policy on top of that. And I think this change of mindset is something that the organizations are encountering today. And it's actually very exciting to see, because identity people become suddenly the number one people that are being asked about, like, hey, how do we do AI governance? Because if we think about it, and I'm rolling back to what I was saying before about access driving the value for organizations, meaning that the number one security people are actually IAM people that are actually driving the policies and governance around this adoption.
I mean, what would you add to that?
Yeah. I want to double down on the accountability model, right? I think this is one of the biggest and most dramatic changes we see across organizations today, right? So we were used to trust people with their access, whether it's developers or business owners, right? And now these people are actually enable their agents to do stuff on behalf of them. But at the same time, there are no policy or controls, right? There is no layer of policy that actually allow the organization to dictate what access my agent have, which is different maybe than my own access, right? And this is a huge shift in the accountability model itself, where that we are seeing to be brought as a very large challenge in the today modern organization.
Walk me through kind of a live path to impact, kind of overprivileged service tokens that lead to lateral movements, that lead to exfiltration of data. Where does Oasis kind of sit, and how do they intercept that chain?
Yeah, great. So there are two lines that moves in parallel all the time, right? One in terms of the value prop. One of them is everything that the organization already created, right? legacy AD service account, Active Directory service accounts, all the way to AI agents that already been created, right? At any point of time in the last 15, 20 years, right? So on this track, Oasis helps them to discover these identities, identify risk, compare them to their internal organizational policies, whether it's internal actually or external auditor, right? And we help them to streamline the lifecycle and compliance of these identities, right? So it's both reducing risk and streamline the operational work that today is mostly being done manually, right? Whether it's the discovery, whether it's the rotation of the accounts and auto remediation, right? On the same time, so that was kind of stop the bleeding. Sorry, that's kind of cleaning the mess. I'm sorry. On the other track, which happens at the same time, we want to help them to actually improving their state for the long run, right? That's stop the bleeding. How Oasis is doing that? We are helping them to make sure their identities and the agents they create going to be governed from the get-go, right? Whether it's to tie them ownership, whether it's to make sure their policies are being compared at the creation, rather of them trying to chase these issues months or years afterwards. So this kind of goes with parallels. So when we partner with our customers and partners, we are initiating the both tracks. And once you do the cleanup, you can move on more to emphasize the second track.
Love it. Danny, I'm gonna pivot back over to you here real quick. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that you guys focus more on that real-time kind of intent-driven identity security. And why is that so important versus just doing audits or manual reviews?
It's not one or the other. It's both. It required to be both. And it's critical because like we want to make sure that our existing infrastructure is being audited and being like controlled all the time. The reasoning why we need to have this like real-time intent is because at the end of the day, like people asking like, how do we handle agents? How do we handle this like new dynamic motion of agents? And then the answer is very simple. We need to take this big problem and deduct it to a problem we can solve. We know how to solve. The way to do it is to cage into a static, basically, problem that we know how to solve, which is like basically, hey, I need permissions to X. I need to do it for this time, and I will need to decommission that because I don't need these permissions anymore after that, right? How do we create that box? This box can be created by real-time intent-based monitoring. You're understanding what the agent wants, right? You're understanding if the policies are allowing to do that. You're connecting those dots together, and you're pulling up like this plan that is a very static plan. Hey, for example, just like Danny needs a permission to do something just in time, creating that, and we're decommissioning, we're doing the same for agents. Why is it so critical to do it automatically? Just because of the scale of the problem. We're not talking anymore like 2 people joining the company a week, right? This is not the world we're living in, fortunately and unfortunately.
No, it makes sense. I'm gonna pull us out a little bit and go a little more macro, a little more philosophical. I think you guys have a pretty cool background, and I think you guys can play along with this. But I play, unfortunately, with a lot of the consulting firms, right? Like the Gartners, the Accentures, the Forresters of the world. And this year in 2025, they started the year saying one of the top priorities on digital transformation is going to be around identity, specifically as it pertains to non-human or entity identity. But then they just stopped talking about it. They just stopped having a conversation about it. They stopped presenting options about how to fix for that. Why do you think it kind of fell off? It was such a big, huge, you got to do this. And now you guys are the ones kind of leading the charge on this. But why do you think it's fallen off a little bit?
I don't think it's falling off. I think it's when you're encountering that this is a massive problem, right? You're jumping into solving that. But if you're like, if you're trying to solve everything with a hammer, right? Like then everything looks like a nail in a hammer problem, right? Which confuses, right? The market in general, like how to address that. And I think there's a very delicate nuance between solving a problem and solving a pain, right? And when you're solving a problem, it's like someone is telling you, hey, I want to do X. Can you help me with that? Solving a pain, it's like, hey, I don't know. I have this pain. I don't know how to solve it. And then it opens up your mind. And then like, this is what we all seen in the market, right? We need to think about it in a different way. We cannot think about it as like solving the legacy NHIs or the legacy identities, I'm sorry. We need to think about it in a different way. And I think this is what happened. And we're seeing that, like, I'm telling you, seeing that on the back end and what's happening. It's still in a very hardcore motion of like identifying how to do it.
I love it. Amit, what do you think? Why do you think it sounds like it's more of a problem issue, right? Versus understanding, but why do you think the market is really driving this and why they were so excited about it earlier this year?
Yeah. So actually, first of all, from our experience, we still do see a lot of excitement
Good. Good.
across the board. Of course, we are working closely with the names you mentioned in the question, right? I can speak. I think eventually what dictates the market pool, right? It's the customers, it's the enterprises. They are the one having the decision whether they want to invest and allocate the budget in order to solve the most painful things they need to solve, right? And we do see it the day by day, right? Both from the traditional legacy accounts all the way to agents, right? So putting analysts aside for a second, we do see this pool just increasing day by day, and maybe that's a question to ask them uh, about that.
But so we're still seeing a high percentage of AI implementations fail. And for me, as a consultant, a lot of times it's because they didn't come up with the outcome or the actual impact to the business. And they jumped straight to trying to create an agentic AI, an LLM, a Gen AI solution before going through their systems and their data. Because of that high fail rate, how much of that is playing over into adding additional security concerns around the NHI side and the agentic AI side?
So multiple facets here. First of all, there's like the interesting motion that we're seeing from a philosophical perspective, right? That people are still grinding and trying because
Right.
they're pretty loose to competition, right? Which is like
Right.
such an intrinsic like human nature like act. The problem here is that we're creating a lot of mess. We're creating a lot of, let's call it, dirt, right? You created like a lot of accounts, you connected it, it's not working. I'm always asking an organization, are you sure you cleaned it up? And there's a quiet in the room for a few seconds. And then like the first honest person says like, no, we did not. And honestly, we are even scared to tell it to the business because like, don't stop it. It's like right now we're innovating, right? Like we don't want like security. What are you talking about? We need to deploy. So I think there's like a very interesting nuance over there, which we need to address. We need to like very clearly address because the point that something was a failure doesn't mean that like we don't need to clean all the NHIs that have been left after that, right? Because like someone can use that for like the wrong purpose. We just like open up the attack surface or more without cleaning it up.
And I think, Rick, there is a phrase we've heard with one of our biggest customers. They told us our leadership says, innovate now, secure later, right? But at the same time, they do expect from them to be on top of what's happening. Right? So they're in this middle ground, which is very unfair to be, right, from the organizational perspective. And I think from the product platform perspective, we need to understand that we cannot just speak with them about the end state, right? The target state they need to be in with all the great technology we are building, but it also how we can be the partner to help them get there, right? Because again, it's always about the business value at the end, right? And through management and security is how we can get them there. So just want to add this topic as well.
No, I think it's great. Let's jump into some shorts, right? Typically 60 seconds or less, 90 seconds, whatever you think works for you guys. I want you guys to have the time. And if we have to turn it into the rest of the podcast, that's great. Danny, I'm going to start with you on this one. If you had to explain an NHI to a CFO in 30 seconds, 60 seconds or less, how would you do it? What's the importance of them knowing it so they can put that in their risk portfolio?
In a very simple way, it's asking them like, you invested in human identities through the years, right? You know this investment. And by the way, dear CFO, you know what is the budget for human identities, right? And we'll stop there for a second and I will ask him like, but hey, what's your organizational focus today? Be out of the company. How do you do that? Adopting agents, adopting cloud. How do you think the agents and cloud are communicating? Through NHIs. How many of those do you have? I'm giving them statistically your organization 50 times more. Does it make sense the spend you have on human identities versus like the non-humans? You have nothing there, by the way. We can stop there basically on that conversation. Was I fair
Love it.
enough?
That was amazing. No, that was perfect. And I love that you like role played with the CFO off in the corner of your room. It was perfect. It was amazing. Amit, I'd love to get your take on how the principle of least privilege for machines can be right sized, the permissions granted appropriately without breaking the agentic pipeline, the automation.
Yeah, and So to answer that first, let's go back to the intent, right? Because the intent of the agent, right, is eventually what downstream will affect the access they need to have. So it's more than just having the right sizing the access, it's also making it just in time where needed, right? So sessions of agents are just being spun up on a crazy scale, and we need to make sure, first of all, making sure they have the right access at the right time, but at the same time make sure we have the compensating controls to make sure that if the needed access is not given, the system can go back and make sure to expand access as needed, right? Because we don't want these pipelines to be broken. Goes back to the operational continuity point from earlier on.
I love it. Amit, I'm going to start with you on this one, and then Danny, I'm going to add to this question. But Amit, for you, the first part of this is, how would you recommend a company to prepare for NHI hygiene?
Right. First of all, decide it's important for them, right? And we see this growing, right? More organizations every day are calling us because they realize they need to handle this problem. And second of all, they basically need to select the product who does that. We do see organization having the other decision, which is basically do it manually, thinking that that's the cheapest thing to do, but eventually this is just too much to consume manually, right? So with the scale and speed these are being created, it's like painting the Eiffel, right? Until you're going to do it, you're going to have to start it all over again. So basically, it's something that manual work cannot solve anymore, and only technology can help them doing that. Once they see the issue, they can start prioritize and going down of cleaning it.
I love it. Danny, take that a step further. Now that they've identified what hygiene they need to prepare for, how do they continuously improve upon that moving forward?
Phenomenal question. And I think it's two elements to that thing. First of all, they need to be able to explain to the leadership why it is important. And many organizations we're dealing with, like the number one thing to do is just, okay, you saw everything. How do I explain to the CIO, to the CFO, for example, that we have a major issue here? And not only we need to solve like a hygiene problem right now, if we don't get ahead of it and like getting like automations in place and stop the bleeding, as Amit was mentioning before, we will have the biggest problem that this organization's seen for a long, long time. And having this discussion opens up the second door, which is like, hey guys, how do we make sure we put the controls in place so this problem won't be happening again? I need a single policy to do that. And I think this is, by the way, honestly, I'm saying like this is the most interesting conversation to have with the market, because this is opens up like how do like organization work operationally? How do we communicate? How do we report it back to the business? How do we enable? How do we get quickly to a stage that like we're not only becoming the department of no, rather becoming a department of enablement, right? Which identity can become. And interestingly enough, we have like a very unique opportunity right now to do that, because every agent today, in order to create it securely, we're talking about provisioning access. It takes hours for a single agent. This is not the pace the business is expecting us to be in.
Right.
So it's a great opportunity for us to have this conversation with the business.
I love it. All right. Quick question, easy question for both of you. Curious to see where you guys each take this. Whoever wants to start can. Top use case for Oasis and why?
I'll let Amit start. Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Yeah. Make the unknown known, right? In non-human identities and agent, and streamline the life cycle of them.
And I will double down on that answer. Like, I think the most exciting for me personally to see when an organization is provisioning NHIs through Oasis, because it creates a trust that Oasis is actually becoming the trusted provisioning access for the organization. So that's from my side.
But I always like to ask one final question. And you guys are in both unique situations because you're both security experts, but you're also entrepreneurs. So I'd love to hear why you love being a cyber pro and why someone should become a cyber pro or an entrepreneur for that matter.
From my side, I would say that this world is always surprising me. There's never a boring moment in the cyberspace, right? Like even when you're like from the offensive, right? Like legal offensive, or like from your defense, it's always just like something new is happening. You need to be all the time on your toes and understanding what's new.
And from my end is waking up every day where I have to solve new challenges, right? That helps other people's lives or make their life easier, right? Either it's to do their job better or growing our people inside the company.
Thank you both for being on the Cyber Pro podcast.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Rick,
It was a
thank you.
pleasure.